My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm 32 years old. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear when my phone buzzed with a message that would change my life forever. I was hooked up to monitors, recovering from emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix, and my husband hadn't visited me once in 3 days. The text read, "I have filed for divorce. Taking the house and car, LOL. Don't bother coming home. You're not needed anymore." I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands shook so violently that the phone nearly slipped from my grip. The heart monitor started beeping faster, and a nurse rushed in, asking if I was okay. But how could I be okay? The man I'd loved for 7 years, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, had just abandoned me while I was lying in a hospital bed. What David didn't know, what he'd never bothered to know, was that I made $130,000 a year as a senior software engineer. The house he thought he was taking? I'd paid the down payment with money from my trust fund. The car he was so proud to claim? Purchased entirely with my bonus checks. Our entire life together had been built on my invisible labor, both financial and emotional. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how I ended up here, married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenient placeholder in his life. Before we continue, if you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship or had someone underestimate you completely, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story is about to take turns you won't see coming, and you won't want to miss a single chapter. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. I met David Rodriguez 6 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. I was 26, freshly promoted, and convinced I had my life figured out. He was 28, charming, and working in retail management. He had this way of making me feel seen, at least, that's what I thought at the time. "You're different from other women," he'd said on our third date, holding my hand across the table at an Italian restaurant I'd suggested and paid for without him noticing. "You're not materialistic. You're real." I'd blushed, taking it as a compliment. Looking back now, I realize it was the first red flag I ignored. What he really meant was, "You're easy to manipulate because you don't demand much." Our courtship was fast. 6 months in, we were living together in my one-bedroom apartment. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony that I planned and paid for while David complained that weddings were just expensive parties. His mother, Patricia, had pulled me aside that day and whispered, "You're so lucky to have my David. He could have had anyone, you know." I'd smiled politely, ignoring the twist in my stomach. After the wedding, David suggested we buy a house. "We need to start building equity," he'd said with the confidence of someone who'd watched one too many real estate shows. "I'll handle the finances. You just focus on your little computer job." My little computer job paid 3 times what he made, but I didn't correct him. I never did. Instead, I quietly transferred $80,000 from my savings account for the down payment, and we bought a beautiful 3-bedroom Craftsman in a quiet neighborhood. The deed had both our names on it, my mistake. David never asked where the money came from. He just assumed we'd gotten lucky with a loan. Meanwhile, he contributed exactly $400 a month toward the mortgage while I covered the remaining $2,200, plus all utilities, groceries, and household expenses. He bought himself new clothes, expensive sneakers, and the latest gaming systems, convinced he was treating himself after hard days at work. I told myself it was fine. Marriage was about partnership, not keeping score. But the keeping score part? That's exactly what David had been doing all along. 2 years into our marriage, David's behavior started shifting. He became distant, constantly on his phone, working late shifts that seemed to multiply every week. When I asked about his day, he'd snap at me or give one-word answers. I'm tired, Rebecca. Not everyone sits in an air-conditioned office all day. The comment stung, but I pushed it aside. I started therapy around this time, not couples therapy, just me. I told Dr. Chin about feeling lonely in my marriage, about how I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming invisible. Does David know how much you contribute financially? She asked during one session. I shifted uncomfortably. We don't really talk about money. Why not? Because talking about money meant acknowledging the truth, that David had married me not for love, but for convenience. That I was funding a lifestyle he could never afford on his own. That admitting this out loud would mean facing how profoundly I'd been used. 3 months ago, things got worse. David became openly hostile. He criticized everything, my cooking, my appearance, the way I loaded the dishwasher. His mother started showing up unannounced, letting herself in with the key David had given her without asking me. Rebecca, dear, Patricia said one afternoon, standing in my kitchen like she owned it, have you thought about trying harder with your appearance? David's a handsome man. You need to keep his interest. I was in sweatpants after a 12-hour workday, having just finished a major product launch that would earn my company millions. But sure, my appearance was the problem. Then came the night that led to my hospital stay. I'd felt sick for 2 days, sharp pains in my abdomen that I'd tried to ignore. David barely noticed. When I finally collapsed in the bathroom, vomiting and unable to stand, I called 911 myself. David was out with friends and didn't answer his phone. The paramedics found me on the bathroom floor. Emergency surgery revealed a ruptured appendix that had been hours away from turning septic. I could have died. The surgeon told me I was lucky I'd called when I did. I texted David from the recovery room, had emergency surgery. Ruptured appendix. I'm okay but scared. Can you come? He responded 3 hours later, busy. We'll try to stop by tomorrow. He never came. Not the next day, or the day after that. Nurses asked about my husband, and I made excuses. He's working, I'd say. He's really busy. Meanwhile, my best friend Jasmine visited every day, bringing me real food and sitting with me through the nights when the pain medication made me nauseous and afraid. Where the hell is David? She demanded on day 2. He's probably just overwhelmed, I whispered, still making excuses for a man who'd shown me exactly who he was. Then came that text. That cold, cruel message that arrived on day 3 while I was still in the hospital bed, still healing from surgery that could have killed me. I have filed for divorce. Taking the house and car, LOL. Don't bother coming home. You're not needed anymore. The casual cruelty of that LOL broke something inside me. I called him immediately, hands shaking. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. By the 10th call, I was crying so hard that a nurse came in and threatened to sedate me if I didn't calm down. Jasmine showed up within 20 minutes of my panicked text to her. She found me in that hospital bed, sobbing into thin pillows, my entire world crumbling. That bastard, she hissed, grabbing my phone. Rebecca, you need to call a lawyer right now. Today. I can't think, I choked out. I can't breathe. Then I'll think for you, she said firmly. She pulled up her own phone and started making calls. Within an hour, she connected me with Miranda Stevens, a divorce attorney known for destroying men who tried to screw over their wives. But even as Jasmine took control, even as the wheels of justice began turning, I couldn't shake one question: how did I miss this? How did I not see that the man sleeping next to me every night was planning to destroy me? I was about to find out that the betrayal went deeper than I could have imagined. Because 3 days after that text, 3 days after David thought he'd successfully discarded me like trash, my phone rang with his number. And when I answered, the panic in his voice told me everything had just changed. What do you think David discovered that made him call in a panic? Drop your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you're as angry as I was. Chapter 2 is coming next, where you'll learn the truth about what David had been doing while I was fighting for my life in that hospital bed. I almost didn't answer when David's name flashed across my phone screen. My finger hovered over the decline button, every cell in my body screaming to ignore him. But something, maybe masochism, maybe the need for closure, made me press accept. Rebecca! Thank God! His voice was breathless, frantic. We need to talk. Right now. This is all a huge misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I cut him off, my voice eerily calm despite the rage boiling beneath my skin. You texted me LOL while I was recovering from emergency surgery. You filed for divorce while I could have been dying. Which part is the misunderstanding, David? I know it looks bad, but if you just let me explain. Where are you? I asked suddenly. I could hear music in the background, laughter, the clinking of glasses. The line went silent except for those distant party sounds. David. Where are you? I'm at my mother's house. There's a family gathering. His words came out rushed, tripping over each other. But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I need you to sign some papers and... I hung up. My hands were steady now, all that shaking fear replaced by something cold and sharp. I looked at Jasmine, who'd been listening to the entire conversation with her eyes growing wider and wider. Call Miranda, I said. Tell her I need her to run a full financial investigation on everything David and I own jointly. And tell her I want to know exactly what David's been doing for the past 3 days. It took Miranda's investigator less than 8 hours to piece together the truth. While I'd been in the hospital, fighting through surgery and recovery completely alone, David hadn't been working late or overwhelmed with worry. He'd been planning a wedding. His wedding. To someone else. Her name was Stephanie Chin, 24 years old, a hostess at the restaurant where David had allegedly been working all those late nights. She was pretty in a calculated way, perfect makeup, styled hair, designer knockoffs that looked real in Instagram photos. The investigator pulled up her social media, and there it was, dozens of photos from 2 days ago. A small ceremony at a boutique hotel downtown. Stephanie in a white dress, David in a suit I'd never seen before, his mother Patricia standing between them with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. The caption read, "Finally married the love of my life. God is good." 2 hearts bride with veil men in tuxedo. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. There was David, his hand on Stephanie's waist, looking at her the way he'd looked at me 6 years ago. There was Patricia, dabbing tears of joy from her eyes. There were David's brothers, his cousins, his friends, all celebrating his marriage to another woman while his actual wife lay in a hospital bed. I'm going to destroy him, I whispered. Jasmine squeezed my shoulder. We're going to destroy him. Legally and thoroughly. Miranda called that evening with more information, and each new detail made my blood run colder. Rebecca, David filed the divorce papers the morning of your surgery, she said. He'd been planning this for at least 2 months. He hired a lawyer, a cheap one, but still. The filing claims you abandoned the marital home and that he's been the primary financial provider throughout your marriage. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. He what? It gets worse. He's claiming the house and car as his separate property, arguing that he made all the payments. He's also requesting spousal support of $2,000 per month. Spousal support. I repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. From me. The woman he abandoned in a hospital. His lawyer clearly didn't do any financial investigation, Miranda said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. They have no idea what you actually earn or what you've contributed. This is going to be fun. What about the marriage to Stephanie? Technically bigamy, since your divorce isn't finalized. That's a felony in this state, Rebecca. He could face up to 3 years in prison. I closed my eyes. 3 years sounded about right. I was discharged from the hospital the next morning, 4 days after David's text. Jasmine drove me home, or what I thought was home. When we pulled up to the house, there was a cheap lock on the front door and my belongings piled on the lawn like garbage. My clothes, soaked from the previous night's rain. My laptop, my books, my grandmother's jewelry box, all sitting in soggy cardboard boxes on the grass. A few items were missing, things I knew David would have taken to sell: my DSLR camera, my collection of vintage vinyl records, the expensive kitchen knife set I'd bought myself for Christmas. That son of a Jasmine started, but I held up my hand. Take photos. Everything. Then help me load my stuff into your car. We worked in silence, documenting every waterlogged box, every missing item. Neighbors peered through curtains, but nobody came out to help or ask questions. I wondered what David had told them. What lies he'd spread about me. When we'd loaded everything we could salvage, I stood in front of the house, my house, the one I paid for, and made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called the locksmith company I'd already contacted that morning. Hi, yes, I need you to change the locks. The phone call from David came again that night, at 2:47 a.m. This time, I was ready. I'd spent the evening at Jasmine's apartment, sorting through what could be saved from my rain-soaked belongings and planning my next moves with Miranda on speakerphone. We'd worked until midnight, building a case so airtight that David wouldn't know what hit him. When my phone lit up with his name, I let it ring 3 times before answering. Control. This was about control now. Rebecca, please, he started, and I could hear actual tears in his voice. I made a terrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I want to come home. I want to fix this. Interesting, I said, my voice flat. What changed in the last 12 hours, David? I realized I love you. I always have. Stephanie was just. I was confused, going through something. What changed? I repeated, harder this time. Silence. Then, quietly, I talked to a real lawyer today. There it was. And what did this real lawyer tell you? I asked, even though I already knew. Miranda had predicted this exact conversation. They said the divorce filing might have some issues. That we need to sit down and talk about the assets properly. That maybe I was too hasty. David. I cut through his rambling. Let me tell you what really happened. You went to your new wife's family dinner tonight, didn't you? And someone there, maybe her uncle, maybe her father, asked about your finances. Asked about the house you promised Stephanie you owned outright. Asked about your income and assets. His breathing got heavier. And you realized you couldn't answer those questions because you've never actually looked at any of our financial documents. You just assumed. So you finally went to a competent lawyer, and they pulled the property records. They pulled the mortgage statements. They looked at the bank accounts. Rebecca. And that lawyer told you the truth, didn't they? That the house is in both our names, but I paid the down payment. That I've been covering 85% of our monthly expenses for 5 years. That you have absolutely no legal right to claim it as separate property. It's not like that. That lawyer also probably mentioned the word bigamy, didn't they, David? The silence that followed was deafening. That's a felony, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. 3 years in prison. Criminal record. The kind of thing that shows up on every background check for every job you'll ever apply to for the rest of your life. I didn't mean, we can annul it. I'll annul the marriage to Stephanie right now. Today. It was a mistake, baby, please. Don't you dare call me baby. The words came out like ice. You texted LOL while I was in a hospital bed. You married another woman 3 days after abandoning your wife. You threw my grandmother's jewelry in the rain. I can fix this. Just tell me what you want. What I wanted. That was the question, wasn't it? 3 weeks ago, I would have wanted him to love me. To see me. To appreciate the sacrifices I'd made. But that Rebecca, the one who made herself small, who paid for everything while pretending it didn't matter, who accepted crumbs and called it love, she was gone. She died somewhere between the hospital bed and the soggy cardboard boxes on the lawn. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., you're going to meet with my lawyer, Miranda Stevens. You're going to bring every financial document you can find, bank statements, pay stubs, credit card bills, everything. You're going to sign an agreement that gives me full ownership of the house in exchange for me not pressing criminal charges for bigamy. That's not fair. That house is worth $600,000. I paid the down payment, David. $80,000 from my trust fund that you never knew existed. I've paid $2,200 of the $2,600 mortgage every single month for 5 years. That's $132,000 I've put into that house while you contributed $24,000. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about fair in front of a judge. I don't have anywhere to go. You have a wife, I said coldly. I'm sure Stephanie's family will be thrilled to host you once they find out you're a bigamist who married their daughter under false pretenses. Rebecca, please. 9 a.m., David. Miranda's office. If you're not there, I call the police and press charges. Your choice. I hung up before he could respond. Jasmine, who'd been listening from the kitchen, came out with 2 glasses of wine. You are officially my hero, she said, handing me one. I'm not done yet, I replied, but I took the wine anyway. David showed up at Miranda's office at 8:45 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled. He'd aged 10 years in less than a week. I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing my favorite navy suit, the one I wore to executive presentations. The one that made me feel powerful. I'd done my makeup carefully, straightened my hair, put on my grandmother's pearl earrings that I'd managed to save from the rain. When David saw me, something flickered across his face. Maybe regret. Maybe just fear. Rebecca, he started, but Miranda cut him off. Mr. Rodriguez, please sit down. We have documents to review. The next 3 hours were brutal and satisfying in equal measure. Miranda laid out every financial record from our marriage, every bank statement, every mortgage payment, every utility bill. She showed him the trust fund statements proving where the down payment had come from. She presented pay stubs showing my $130,000 annual income versus his $38,000. Your divorce filing claims you were the primary financial provider, Miranda said, sliding the paperwork across the table. These documents show that your wife contributed 78% of your household income and covered 85% of all expenses. That's what we call fraud, Mr. Rodriguez. David's cheap lawyer, a nervous man named Gary who looked fresh out of law school, shuffled papers helplessly. We weren't aware of the full financial picture, he mumbled. Clearly, Miranda said dryly. Now, let's discuss the bigamy charges. David went pale. I told you, we can annul it. You married another woman while still legally married to my client. You did this 3 days after filing for divorce, which means you knew you were still married. Intent matters, Mr. Rodriguez. And then there's the issue of fraud. You promised your new wife assets you don't actually own. Stephanie doesn't know about the house situation, David blurted out. Oh, this keeps getting better, Jasmine muttered from her seat beside me. Miranda smiled. So you committed fraud against both your legal wife and your illegal wife. Impressive. What do you want? David finally asked, looking directly at me for the first time. Just tell me what it'll take to make this go away. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. You're going to sign a quitclaim deed giving me full ownership of the house. You're going to return every item you took from my belongings, the camera. 1 year after the divorce, I stood in front of a room full of women at the community center downtown, my hands surprisingly steady as I held the microphone. This was the 12th financial literacy workshop I'd led, but somehow it still felt like the first. My name is Rebecca Martinez, I began, and 3 years ago, I was married to a man who had no idea I made $130,000 a year. Not because I hid it, but because he never bothered to ask. The women in the audience leaned forward. I recognized that look in their eyes, the hunger for answers, the desperate hope that someone understood their invisible struggle. Today, I'm going to teach you how to protect yourself financially, how to know your worth, and how to make sure nobody ever takes advantage of you the way I was taken advantage of. Because the truth is, financial abuse is real, and it doesn't always look like what you think it does. As I clicked through my presentation, sharing screenshots of bank statements and legal documents, all carefully anonymized, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. This was who I'd become in the aftermath of David's betrayal. Not bitter. Not broken. But awake. The transformation hadn't been easy or linear. There were still nights when I lay awake, wondering how I'd missed the signs. Nights when Luna would sense my distress and rest her head on my chest, grounding me back to the present. But those nights were becoming fewer and farther between. After the workshop, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been older than 25, with tired eyes and nervous hands clutching a worn purse. Ms. Martinez, she said quietly. I think I'm in a situation like you described. My boyfriend controls all our money, even though I make more than him. He says it's because I'm bad with finances, but I feel trapped. I sat down with her in the empty community room, and for the next hour, I helped her create a safety plan. A separate bank account. Copies of important documents. A list of resources. By the time she left, there were tears in her eyes, but they were tears of hope. "You saved my life tonight," she whispered, hugging me. "No," I told her gently. "You saved your own life by asking for help. I just handed you the tools." Driving home that night, I thought about how strange life was. A year ago, I'd been sleeping on Jasmine's couch, crying over a man who'd thrown my belongings in the rain. Now I was helping other women avoid the same fate. Pain had a purpose, I was learning. If you let it transform you instead of destroy you. The biggest surprise came 3 months after that workshop, on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was in my home office, the room that used to be David's gaming cave, now converted into a bright workspace with plants and natural light, when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Ms. Martinez? This is Claire Whitmore from the Women's Empowerment Foundation. I attended your workshop last month, and I was incredibly impressed with your presentation." I straightened in my chair. The Women's Empowerment Foundation was one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the country, dedicated to helping women escape domestic and financial abuse. "We're looking for someone to head up our new Financial Freedom Initiative," Claire continued. "It's a national program to teach financial literacy to women in vulnerable situations." When I watched you speak, I knew you were exactly who we needed. "Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity?" My heart hammered. "You want me to run a national program? We want you to build it from the ground up. Design the curriculum, train the facilitators, create the resources. You'd work with our legal team, our counselors, our shelter network. The position comes with a salary of $165,000 and full benefits, plus travel budget for speaking engagements." I sat there, stunned. A year ago, David had texted LOL while I lay in a hospital bed. Now I was being offered the chance to turn my worst experience into something that could help thousands of women. "Ms. Martinez? Are you still there?" "Yes," I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. "Yes, I'm very interested." The interview process took 6 weeks. I met with board members, presented my vision for the program, and shared my story more times than I could count. Each telling hurt a little less, like a wound that was finally scarring over instead of staying raw. Jasmine threw me a celebration dinner when I got the official offer. She invited my coworkers, my therapy group, and the core volunteers from my workshops. To Rebecca, she toasted, raising her glass, who turned her pain into power and her nightmare into a mission. "We are so damn proud of you." Everyone cheered. I looked around the table at these faces, some I'd known for years, others I'd only met in the aftermath of my divorce, and realized something profound. David had tried to isolate me, to make me small and dependent. Instead, he'd accidentally forced me to build the most incredible support system I'd ever had. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "All of you. You held me together when I couldn't hold myself. You reminded me who I was when I'd forgotten. This job, this life I'm building, it exists because you believed in me first." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my back porch with Luna curled at my feet. The garden I'd planted was in full bloom, roses and lavender and herbs that filled the air with sweetness. My house. My garden. My life. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I heard about your new job. Congratulations. You deserve it." There was no name, but I knew it was David. Maybe he'd heard through the grapevine. Maybe Patricia had seen something online. It didn't matter. I didn't respond. I didn't block the number either. I just set my phone down and went back to watching my garden grow. Some people don't deserve your words, not even to tell them off. Sometimes the best response is simply living well. The first 6 months at the Women's Empowerment Foundation were intense. I traveled to 12 cities, training facilitators and setting up workshops. I worked with lawyers to create simple legal guides for women in financial abuse situations. I partnered with banks to establish confidential accounts for women planning to leave dangerous relationships. And everywhere I went, I met women who reminded me of who I used to be. There was Michelle in Denver, whose husband had opened credit cards in her name and destroyed her credit score. There was Aisha in Atlanta, who'd put her husband through medical school only to have him leave her for a nurse once he started making money. There was Jennifer in Seattle, whose mother-in-law had convinced her she was worthless while quietly draining her inheritance. I sat with each of them. I listened to their stories. And I told them what I wished someone had told me years ago: this is not your fault. You are not stupid or weak. You were trusting, and someone weaponized that trust. But you're going to survive this, and you're going to be stronger than you ever imagined. By the end of that first year, we'd helped over 800 women create safety plans and understand their financial rights. The program was being featured in major publications. I'd been invited to speak at conferences, on podcasts, even on a few morning news shows. How does it feel, one interviewer asked me, to have turned such a painful experience into something so positive? I thought carefully before answering. It feels like I finally found the reason I went through it. Not that I deserved what happened, nobody deserves betrayal. But maybe I survived it so I could help others survive it too. Maybe that's the point of all our worst moments, to transform them into our greatest strengths. 18 months after the divorce, I ran into David's mother at the grocery store. Patricia was in the produce section, looking older than I remembered, her hair more gray than brown now. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and her expression went through several rapid changes: surprise, guilt, defiance. For a moment, I considered walking away. But something made me push my cart toward her instead. "Hello, Patricia," I said evenly. "Rebecca." She gripped her shopping basket tighter. I didn't expect to see you. I live nearby. I kept the house, remember? She flinched. Good. I heard about your job, she said stiffly. Helping women or something? Helping women escape financial abuse, yes. Business is booming, unfortunately. The barb landed. Patricia's face reddened. What David did was wrong, she said quietly, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But you have to understand, he was under so much pressure. Stephanie's family expected things from him, and he just... Stop, I interrupted. I don't want excuses. I don't need your justification for why your son abandoned his wife in a hospital bed and committed bigamy. I know exactly who David is, and I know exactly who raised him to think that behavior was acceptable. Patricia's eyes went wide. How dare you? No, Patricia. How dare you? You stood in my kitchen and told me I needed to try harder to keep David's interest. You came to my home, the home I paid for, and treated me like I was lucky to be married to your son. You knew he was cheating, didn't you? You knew about Stephanie before I did. Her silence confirmed it. I thought so, I said, my voice steady despite the old hurt trying to resurface. You raised a man who thinks women exist to serve him. Who thinks it's okay to use people and throw them away? And when it all blew up in his face, you probably made excuses for him then too. He's struggling, Patricia said, and there were actual tears in her eyes now. He lost his job, his apartment. He's back home with me, and he's so depressed. And whose fault is that, Patricia? Who made the choices that led to those consequences? She didn't answer. I hope someday David gets the help he needs, I said, meaning it. I hope he learns that people aren't tools to be used. I hope he understands the damage he caused. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I've moved on to helping people who actually want to change. I started to push my cart away, then paused. Oh, and Patricia? If you ever feel like making excuses for financial abuse, I run workshops every second Tuesday at the community center. You might learn something. I didn't wait for her response. I just walked away, leaving her standing there in the produce section with her mouth hanging open. It felt incredibly good. That evening, I called Dr. Chin. We still had monthly sessions, maintenance appointments to keep me grounded and growing. I ran into Patricia today, I told her. And I stood up for myself. I didn't yell or cry or fall apart. I just told her the truth. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said, and realized it was true. For the first time since all of this happened, I feel completely free. Like I've finally let go of needing anything from them, not apologies, not understanding, not validation. They can't hurt me anymore because I don't need them to see my worth. I already know it. That's incredible growth, Rebecca. You should be very proud of yourself. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, the kitchen Patricia had once criticized, in the house she treated like it belonged to her son, and I smiled. I'd worked a full day, helped 3 women create financial safety plans, grocery shopped for the dinner party I was hosting that weekend, and put a deposit on a vacation rental in Portugal for next month. My life was full. Rich. Mine. David had tried to take everything from me, and instead, he'd accidentally given me the greatest gift, the realization that I didn't need him or anyone else to be complete. I'd been whole all along. 2 years after the divorce, I stood in front of a mirror in a hotel room in Chicago, adjusting my blazer before going on stage at the National Women's Conference. I was the keynote speaker, talking to over 2,000 women about financial empowerment and healing from betrayal. My phone buzzed with messages. Jasmine, you're going to kill it. Wish I could be there. Mom, so proud of you, Mija. Your father is watching the live stream. Miranda, show them what a phoenix looks like, Rebecca. And one more, from an email address that made me pause, David's. I watched your interview on the Today Show. You look happy. Really happy. I'm glad. I know I destroyed what we had, but I'm grateful that it didn't destroy you. You're doing amazing things. I hope someday I can do half as much good in the world as you're doing now. I read it once, then put my phone away without responding. The old Rebecca would have analyzed every word, looking for hidden meanings or manipulation. The new Rebecca understood that some messages don't require responses. David's guilt was his to carry, not mine to absolve. I walked onto that stage to thunderous applause. The lights were bright. The crowd was enormous, and I felt absolutely no fear. Good morning, I said into the microphone, and my voice carried clear and strong across the auditorium. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I want to tell you about the day I discovered I'd been invisible in my own life, and how I became the most visible version of myself I'd ever been. For the next hour, I shared my story. Not with shame or bitterness, but with honesty and hope. I talked about the hospital bed, the cruel text, the rain-soaked belongings. But I also talked about the strength I found, the community that held me, and the purpose I'd discovered in the wreckage. Betrayal changes you, I told them. But you get to choose how it changes you. It can make you bitter and small, or it can crack you open so wide that light pours in and transforms you into someone you never dreamed you could be. I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone. But I also wouldn't trade who I've become for anything. Because this version of me, the one standing here today, she's authentic and powerful and unshakable. She knows her worth. And nobody can ever take that from her again. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. After the conference, I had dinner with 3 other speakers, all women who'd overcome their own devastating challenges and turned them into missions. We talked late into the night about our work, our dreams, and the strange gift of survival. "Do you ever miss who you were before?" one of them asked. "Before the thing that changed you?" I thought about the old Rebecca. The one who made herself small. Who paid for everything and accepted nothing in return. Who believed love meant sacrifice without reciprocation. "No," I said honestly. "I don't miss her at all. I'm grateful to her for surviving, but I'm so much happier being who I am now." Flying home the next day, I looked out the airplane window at the clouds and thought about everything that had happened in 2 years. How I'd gone from a hospital bed to a national stage. How I'd transformed devastation into purpose. My phone was full of messages from women who'd watched my keynote online, sharing their own stories, asking for help, thanking me for giving them hope. Each message was a reminder that my pain had meaning, that David's betrayal had accidentally set me on a path I never would have found otherwise. I'd tried to build a life around making one person love me. Instead, I'd ended up building a life around helping thousands of people love themselves. The universe had a funny sense of humor sometimes. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner party at my house. Jasmine came, of course, along with my coworkers, some women from my workshops, and a few new friends I'd made through my advocacy work. We ate pasta I'd made from scratch using herbs from my garden. We drank wine on my back porch. We laughed until we cried, sharing stories and dreams and the comfortable silences of people who genuinely knew and loved each other. At one point, Jasmine clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," she said, standing up. 2 years ago, my best friend was lying in a hospital bed, getting the worst text message anyone could imagine. And I remember thinking, this is going to break her. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "But you didn't break. You bent, you cracked, you fell apart temporarily. But then you put yourself back together in a completely new configuration. You turned lead into gold, Rebecca. You turned betrayal into a movement. And all of us here, we're better people because you showed us what real strength looks like." Everyone raised their glasses. "To Rebecca," they chorused. "To survival," I added quietly, "and to becoming the person you were always meant to be." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Luna was snoring softly in her bed, I sat on my back porch alone. The moon was full, the air was warm, and my garden was fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. I thought about David's email, his admission that he destroyed what we had. And I realized something profound: he was wrong. He hadn't destroyed anything. He just revealed the truth, that what we had was built on my sacrifice and his selfishness, and it was never going to last. The real relationship, the one that mattered, was the one I'd built with myself. And that relationship was unbreakable now. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd started keeping a gratitude journal in therapy, writing down 3 things I was grateful for each day. Tonight's entry was easy. 1. For the betrayal that freed me. 2. For the strength I didn't know I had. 3. For the woman I became when I finally saw myself clearly. Then I added one more line, something Dr. Chin had said that stuck with me. You are the love story you were always waiting for. I closed my phone and sat there in the moonlight, in my house, in my life, feeling completely and utterly whole. David had sent that text thinking he was discarding something worthless. Instead, he'd freed something priceless, the real me, the version who'd been waiting underneath all those years of trying to be enough for someone else. I smiled at the moon. Somewhere out there, David was living with his choices. Patricia was making excuses. Stephanie was probably dating someone new. And I was helping women find their power. I was living authentically. I was building something meaningful. I had won, not by destroying them, but by refusing to let their actions destroy me. And that, I thought as I headed inside to sleep in my sage green bedroom with my rescue dog and my hard-earned peace, was the best revenge of all. The end. So here's my final question for you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that, in hindsight, was actually the best thing that could have happened to you? Have you ever been underestimated only to rise up and prove everyone wrong, including yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, you are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by what you do with what happens to you. Your worst moment doesn't have to be your defining moment, unless you choose to let it define you as a survivor, a warrior, and someone who refused to stay broken. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with anyone who needs to remember their own strength. And most importantly, look in the mirror today and recognize the incredible person staring back at you, the one who survived everything that tried to break them and is still standing, still growing, still becoming. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, the best revenge is becoming the person you were always meant to be. And you, my friend, are already on your way. You are worthy. You are valuable. You are enough. You always were.